So the latest in the Epstein Files is the following. Today at 9 a.m., Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche arrived in Tallahassee at the United States Attorney's Office in order to conduct a sit-down meeting with Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, recall, she went to trial and she was convicted on charges of her own. And she was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison back in 2022. She has been serving that prison sentence in a federal corrections facility that's located in Tallahassee, Florida. So not only is Todd Blanche there with his team from the U.S. Attorney's Office, in addition to that, we also know Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys are also present because, look, they're not going to have Ghislaine Maxwell meet with the feds without actually having some guardrails, including that they be present themselves. Why? Because I'll remind you that Ghislaine Maxwell's case is still pending its petition to the United States Supreme Court, meaning she has been asking the United States Supreme Court to take up her convictions and sentence and to basically overturn those convictions and sentence. She claims that there was prosecutorial misconduct and all sorts of bad stuff that happened. And what's interesting is the current Trump Department of Justice under the leadership of Pamela Jo Bondi has objected to the relief that Ghislaine Maxwell has sought. And so now they're sitting down with her. Now, look, according to Pamela Jo earlier this week, and she posted it on the cesspool of X, she said, quote, "President Trump has told us to release all credible evidence. If Ghislaine Maxwell has information about anyone who has committed crimes against victims, the FBI and the DOJ will hear what she has to say." And yet, just this past Friday, in a statement to the Wall Street Journal, both Pamela Jo and Todd Blanche said that nothing in the Epstein files warranted further investigation or prosecution. So, let's just take a second here. If nothing in the Epstein files warrants, quote, further investigation or prosecution, why in the world is Todd Blanche meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell today? Unless there is a deal that is being sought, unless there is a deal that the DOJ is trying to make with someone who has been found guilty of horrific crimes against young girls and against young women. And I just want to take a minute here, if you don't mind, to remind people that Maureen Comey, as a part of the federal prosecution team that went to trial against Ghislaine Maxwell, that she was summarily fired from her job as a federal prosecutor just last week. Yes, that is James Comey's daughter. But here's the thing. Why now? We all want to know. But the reason why I bring up Maureen's name is I wanted to share the following with you. I went to the sentencing filing that was done by the United States government. And this was done and filed back on June 22nd of 2022 in the case of the United States of America versus Ghislaine Maxwell. It's a 55-page filing, and it is the government's sentencing memorandum. And it is sobering. It's sobering. It literally lays out for you to read the proof that was elicited during the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. And it details the sexual abuse, and it's graphic and it's horrible. It details the sexual abuse of not only Virginia Roberts and Annie Farmer, but other young girls. And it explains why certain enhancements were being sought by the federal government against Maxwell for her role in this sex trafficking ring. But the thing I want to focus on for purposes of this Blanche meeting is the following. According to the government sentencing memorandum, and listen, this is the Department of Justice, right? So it's not like it's not supposed to be a certain DOJ here and a certain DOJ here. It's supposed to be the Department of Justice of the United States of America. But in this instance, this was back in 2022, which was what? This was the Biden DOJ, right? And this is what is said. It says here, moreover, the record at sentencing makes clear that Ghislaine Maxwell, the defendant, has engaged in a significant pattern of dishonest conduct, which speaks volumes about her character. The defendant's record includes the following. In 2016, the defendant testified under oath in a civil deposition in connection with a lawsuit brought by Virginia Roberts and lied repeatedly during her testimony. For example, she denied, among other things, having given Annie Farmer a massage. As the evidence at trial established, that was a lie. Upon her arrest, the defendant was interviewed by pretrial services and told them that the home she owned in New Hampshire was owned by a corporation and that she was, quote, just able to stay there. That was a lie, as were her statements to pretrial services about her finances. In an order denying the defendant's renewed application for bail, the court remarked on the defendant's lack of candor about her finances and concluded that the defendant had misrepresented key facts to pretrial services and, by extension, the court. On November 1st, 2021, the court allocated the defendant about whether she had engaged in plea discussions with the government. Okay, people, let's focus on this part right here. Although the court's question called for a yes or no answer about plea offers, the defendant elected to volunteer the following, quote, I have not committed any crime. That was a lie. In preparation for sentencing, Maxwell refused to give any information about the circumstances of her marriage. She reported she had almost no assets, which is not true because apparently she had earlier represented she had approximately $22 million in assets. Here it goes. In short, the defendant apparently decides when she wishes to disclose facts to the court, and those facts shift when it serves the defendant's interests. Moreover, even now at sentencing, the defendant has shown no acceptance of responsibility, and her submission fails to even mention, much less accept responsibility for the harm she has caused her victims. Instead, her entire submission is an effort to cast herself as a victim of her father, of Epstein, of the media, of prosecutors, of the Bureau of Prisons. Folks, I wanted to read that to you because I wanted to make sure that we understood A, what's at stake today with this meeting between Blanche and Maxwell, and B, why anything that is being said by Maxwell is going to have to be cast under serious doubt. When push comes to shove, as the government has alleged, Maxwell will say what she needs to say to protect her own self-interest. And a woman who has been serving a 20-year federal prison sentence since 2022, you don't think that she's incentivized to say what she needs to say to curry favor with the federal government that is currently at odds with her relief that she's seeking? That is a government that could give her a one-way ticket the hell out of federal prison? This is important context for the conversation we're about to have right now with Congressman Robert Garcia. He is heading up House Oversight on behalf of the Dems. And the reason why we wanted to speak to Congressman Garcia is because they have actually figured out a way to get the release of all of the Epstein files. So let's bring in Congressman Garcia right now. Congressman Robert Garcia already delivering results for the people. I don't know, how long has it been now? Only about a couple of weeks that you've actually become ranking member?
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks, but this is an important win for the American public, but also I'm really proud of our Oversight Committee, of course. So huge win.
Talk about how you managed to get at least 3 GOP votes in support of getting this subpoena to the Department of Justice for the release of all of the Epstein files.
Well, the important thing is we knew that there were Republicans on this committee that had publicly said they wanted to release the files. So we knew that. We also knew that they weren't expecting us to bring this up at the subcommittee meeting. The subcommittee meeting was actually about trafficked children, and Republicans had set this meeting on this committee conversation up around the border, other issues. So we thought this was a good opportunity to make this motion and compel those that were there. And we knew that their attendance wasn't likely going to be as strong as our attendance. And so at the start of the meeting, we had one of our committee rankers, Summer Lee, who's fantastic, make the motion. She laid it out. I was there, supported her, and they were stunned. And they were essentially forced to take that vote at that meeting. And 3 of them broke with the remaining Republicans and joined the 5 Democrats. And we got that subpoena of the Epstein files.
Listen, the Republicans were trying to play fast and loose. So knowing that they were backed into a corner, they then wanted to add this gratuitous adjective of credible, that the subpoena would only be for, quote, credible information. Talk about why it was important to get that adjective out of the way.
man, we fought hard on that and we got it out. I mean, Nancy Mace wanted to essentially amend the language of our motion and add this word, add credible, which essentially would have allowed the DOJ, Pam Bondi, Donald Trump, to make it to decide what they considered credible or not. And Nancy Mace kept going back to wanting to add this word credible. And I'm thinking, who's sending her this message? I mean, who's telling her to add this word credible to the motion? And so I went back and forth with her a couple times. We were not going to accept that. And we knew that they did not have full membership at the committee. And so they had 5 members there. We had 5 members there, which is why we brought it up. And so when we forced to take a vote, and I would not accept, and I told our team on the committee, we're not accepting that. When we pushed back hard and they were forced to take the vote, which I called for, it failed because it was 5-5. Ooh. And so that ended up failing because she had gotten one more Republican. When there are other Republicans at the committee that were no-shows, she would have got that into the motion, which would have been a huge disaster, I think, in actually getting transparency. So we won again there on our committee and kind of outplayed and outsmarted them, I think.
Yeah, you definitely outwitted them. And listen, that word credible, that came from their dear leader. That was part of, what he claimed was going to be requested to be released. But look, I concur with you, right? There is nothing wrong with full transparency. And that means nobody gets to gatekeep what the American people end up seeing, obviously with understandable redactions to protect the victims, the survivors, and the vulnerable, but getting all that information. So let's talk about this letter dated today that you have just sent to James Comer over on Oversight. And basically it says, look, I am giving you not only a Schedule A, which for those of us that are living in the law, and a lot of people here at the Katie Phang News Channel are going back to law school with me, this schedule is really explicit. It clearly defines to the Department of Justice what is being sought to be produced. It also includes within the letter to James Comer a deadline, frankly, sir, where you said, look, we want the Department of Justice to produce the full and complete files within 30 calendar days. Explain why it was so important to make sure that you put in a time-specific deadline by which these documents have to be produced.
That is incredibly important. And here's why. Because we know that Republicans, the DOJ, Trump, have been trying to stall this out. And they're trying to create distractions. And so it's very important that once a subpoena is issued, and we actually think it'll be issued here in the next few days, week or so. That's been actually what James Comer has said. He said it to the public, to other folks, including us. Then he needs to demand that we get those documents in 30 days. If we do not, then we know that they are trying to stall. And so we need to ramp this up expeditiously. And here's why it's also important. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell is going to be testifying. Right now, she's talking to the DOJ, which I think we have a lot of concerns about. But if the deposition goes forward to the Oversight Committee on August 11th, this is someone that is a convicted liar. She has sex trafficked. She's been involved in sex trafficking of youngsters. She's not a good person. She's done horrific things. She's trying to get some kind of deal out of the DOJ, as we know, and she's having those conversations today. But when she comes and is deposed to our committee, and we talk to her and her lawyers about what she knows, we can't just accept what she says as fact. Mm-hmm. We need to actually then verify what she is telling us with the documents, the videos, and the files that are all part of these kind of Epstein documents. And so if we don't corroborate that information, I don't know that we can trust what she's actually telling us when she's being deposed by the committee. So us getting the documents in a way that is expeditious is important, not just for the deposition of Ms. Maxwell, but for all other subpoenas, all other conversations that we have to be able to then actually take that information and match it with the facts, the documents, and the videos that we get, because I can't trust the DOJ. I cannot trust Donald Trump and Pam Bondi to do the right thing.
We know what the Trump administration on prior occasions and even presently think about congressional subpoenas. Talk about enforcement then, Congressman. How do we make sure that this subpoena that is being sent, that has some measure of bipartisan support, and listen, and it's not just what you guys were able to pull off on your subcommittee. We actually have seen Republicans step forward to say that they want the release of these files. But how do we get the enforcement done to make sure that these files are turned over to your committee?
Right. I think first we are working with Comer right now. There is some bipartisan agreement on how we move forward. I think that's a good sign. The fact that we got 3 Republicans to join the 5 Democrats is a very good sign. So this is a bipartisan oversight committee subpoena. James Comer is in. He says he's supportive of it. And so it's going to be much more difficult for the Department of Justice to stall this subpoena when it is a bipartisan group of House members. And more, by the way, are speaking out every day and asking for the release of these documents. These Republicans are going home right now in their districts and they are getting hounded by their constituents saying, you got to fight for the release of these documents. I feel betrayed by Donald Trump. Let's get this information and the truth out there. Now, right now, we're expecting to receive these documents unredacted. If somehow the DOJ stalls, then that will be a different escalation that we will have to consider at that time. And you can believe that we will be going all in to ensure that we get those documents through whatever process or whatever court process we need to go through. But to ignore a subpoena of this magnitude in a bipartisan way, I think would be a huge mistake by the Department of Justice and Donald Trump.
And I want to stay on this for just a second, because I do think it's important to talk about the bigger picture implications of having, again, some bipartisan component to this. James Comer is, someone who's squarely been in Trump's corner. The fact that he is actually signing off on being a part of this subpoena to the Department of Justice, in addition with moving forward with the deposition of Ghislaine Maxwell at some point in August, hopefully on August 11th. Your thoughts about what message is being sent to MAGA? Is there a piercing of what I call the bubble of ignorance that the people in MAGA land have been living in?
I think there is. I've been surprised. I've talked to some supporters of Trump's on this issue and kind of just probe what they thought. And their sense of betrayal is really, really intense. This is actually reaching them in a way where they feel like, wow, Donald Trump lied to us. He betrayed. What else is he hiding? This is it. And what we're talking about here is the abuse of children. We're talking about a cover-up on what actually happened. And we know that Donald Trump is somehow in these documents and files or videos. And so all of this, I think, is an opportunity for us to continue to push to particularly his supporters that Donald Trump lied to you. Donald Trump betrayed you. And he's not only going to take away your health care, he's going to give away your money to billionaires. He's going to lower services for you and your family. He's going to also lie to you and betray you and not fulfill his campaign promises that actually mattered to you. And so I think that is why this is breaking through and why Republicans are hearing the same thing from their constituents. So they're acting and reacting. This is, I think, the first major break that House Republicans are beginning to have with Donald Trump. And that's a good thing for the country.
And we know that today, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States from the Department of Justice, right, going to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tallahassee, Florida. Her legal team also reporting to have been present. We don't know what was discussed. And yet this comes on the heels of Blanche and Attorney General Pamela Bondi stating to the Wall Street Journal this past Friday that there is nothing left to investigate or no one left to prosecute after their, quote, exhaustive review of the Epstein files. Your thoughts then, Congressman, as to what in the world could Todd Blanche possibly then need to speak with Ghislaine Maxwell about?
Well, that's the big question. Well, and let's be clear. He's essentially Trump's personal lawyer. I mean, that's who he is, right? I mean, this is someone that is there on behalf of Donald Trump. The days where we had a separation between the White House and the president and the DOJ and investigations is over. And Donald Trump has blurred that line and, in fact, is creating, I think, a horrific precedent for the future. So now we have the president's essentially personal attorney, a member of the DOJ, representing Donald Trump. I think maybe cutting some type of deal, we're not sure, with Ms. Maxwell and the attorneys to essentially get whatever information is going to make Donald Trump look better when she speaks to the Oversight Committee or whenever that information is released. And you're exactly right. When Pam Bondi says, "Oh, there is no there," then why continue the probe? Why now all of a sudden the interest? And it's completely the timing of us seeking the deposition and us working to get more information from her, and this effort to now bring her back into this kind of broader public relations campaign that Donald Trump is trying to put out, should concern every single American. But what they don't understand is we're not going to roll over. And the Oversight Committee and other Democrats, we are now going to match that same energy that Donald Trump brought, that he talked about every day in his damn campaign. He's going to release the files. His son, we're going to release the files. His entire operation was about transparency in the Epstein case. Fine. They wanted this fight. We're going to give them this fight, and we're going to make sure that we actually get the truth for the American public.
And, Congressman, there's something that you have said, and I've always respected and admired the fact that you've maintained that the victims and the survivors of one of the worst pedophiles in American history, Jeffrey Epstein, in conjunction with his co-conspirator, who was also convicted of several crimes, sentenced to 20 years, that being Ghislaine Maxwell, and others. And I put that in quotes because that is actual language that was pulled out of the indictments for both Epstein and Maxwell, that there were others that they worked with or that they, conspired with or that were a part of this horrific trafficking and abuse of young girls and women. You've always maintained that part of this transparency move is to make sure, though, that we don't forget about the victims and the survivors here.
It's absolutely right. I mean, these crimes were sick, disgusting. They should bother everybody. I mean, the abuse of children, sexual abuse of children, the exploitation of young women. And we have to always remember that justice for them is incredibly important throughout this whole process. And anyone that was involved in these horrific acts should be held accountable. And I don't care. Others have said, I could care less who's in those documents, who's implicated, how powerful they are, whether they were in politics, whether they were in business, how much wealth they have. What's important is that there's justice for these victims, and that if you were involved with these horrific crimes that Epstein and his associates were out there performing every single day, then you should be held accountable to the American public.
Congressman Robert Garcia, look, it was a great move making sure that somebody like you became ranking member on Oversight. And I think this is exactly the kind of fire, the fighting fire with fire that we need from Democrats in DC, from our electeds. And the fact that you are basically outwitting the Republicans on this issue. My hat off to you guys, including Summer Lee. Thank you so much, Congressman, for taking the time to getting us caught up on everything that's going on.
Thanks so much.
Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.